Welcome to this oral history interview, part of a developing series of interviews focused on African American experiences along Route 66, centered around Greene County, Missouri. My name is Samuel Knox. This series is supported in part by a grant from the Route 66 Corridor Preservation Program of the National Park Service. Today's date is Monday, November 10th, 2014. Our special guest today is Father Moses Berry, pastor of the Unexpected Joy Orthodox Church in Ash Grove, Missouri. Father Moses is also a curator of the Ozarks Afro-American Heritage Museum. Thank you for being our guest, Father Moses Berry.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Our first question is, when and where were you born?
Well, I was born about 300 yards from here in the house just behind us. I live in the house that my great-grandparents built in 1871. My great-grandmother, Caroline Boone Berry, and my great-grandfather built that house. My grandfather was born and raised in that house. My father was born and raised in that house. I was born and raised in that house. And now I'm raising my children there, although they have flown the coop, as they say. But we come from a long line of Ozarkians. So in 1950, as the great poet Eugene Fields would say, I was born between the dark and the daylight. So.
Okay. Did you also grow up in the Ash Grove area?
I grew up here. I spent most of my childhood here, but my family moved away when I was 17 years old.
What was it like growing up in rural Ash Grove, Missouri?
Well, I think that different people have different experiences of their growing up. I can only speak about my personal experience, which involved being somewhat of a privileged character. Because my grandfather was Wallace White. Wallace White was the first black man in the Missouri State Cavalry. They fought at Vicksburg. And my grandmother was his daughter. So we already had certain status from living in this town. My other great-grandparents were Caroline and William Boone Berry, who were Nathan Boone's children. So, you know, we were known, it's like somebody used to say, we were a known quantity. And people knew who we were. So we didn't experience a lot of the direct conflict that time in American history brought for many African American people. Ours was sort of we were sheltered from those things, for one, from our folks. And we didn't have that same experience here in Ash Grove. My brothers and I were going to public school here before Brown versus Board of Education, because we're Mamie's grandchildren, and that's where we had to go to school. So, but once we left our community, then you know, the experience was not so personable, or maybe it was quite personable, but it was a negative personal experience.
Mm-hmm. The Berry family's farm is about 140-year-old property, and there is a cemetery on the property as well.
Yes.
Can you kind of tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. You know, when this property was first built, directly after the Civil War, it was against the law for African American people to be buried in the common cemetery. And so, my great-grandfather William Berry and his wife Caroline set aside 6 acres, which is sort of dwindled down to 3.5 acres now, because we weren't able to manage that property. Actually, well, that's a different story. But it was now about 3.5 acres. And it was dedicated to slaves Indians, and Paupers. It's on the National Historic Sites Registry. And it was inducted into the society in the same year that Jefferson Barracks was in St. Louis, Missouri. And we had a big ceremony there, and people from all over came to take part in the ceremony. We even had the Ash Grove Marching Band came and played, and we had an honor guard from Fort Leonard Wood that came down and had a nice ceremony. Chief Joseph Two Bears, who's one of the Native Americans who are buried there. We have 3 Osage Indian mounds there. And one of the relatives of the people who occupy those Osage mounds is Chief Joseph Two Bears from the Osage Nation. And Chief Joseph brought a delegate of certain people to the ceremony, to the founding ceremony. Actually, we call it founding. That's what they call it. We call it rededication, because it was already founded. It was already dedicated. And, they may not have recognized it for whatever reasons, not altogether necessarily racial reasons, but that did play a part in it. And so that's our cemetery. There are 37 tombstones there that are marked tombstones. And if I had a chance, I would show you, and perhaps you can see it this morning. I'll have that young man who was just in here, I'll have him go to our house and bring one of those tombstones that was just recovered. And everybody in the Springfield Museum and all around have been looking for this tombstone. This tombstone is titled Mahala. Mahala, the consort, what a name, the consort of William Prunty, physician, the great-great-granddaughter of Nathan Boone, and the great-great-granddaughter of Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Boone. And it was lost. And if you go on the archives and if you go online and you look for it, people wonder where it is, because at one time they knew where it was. It was in the Wilson's Creek Cemetery. And at that time, people thought that this was during the influenza epidemic. And people thought that you could spread influenza through inanimate objects. And they unearthed many tombstones in that area because they thought they were the source of, of course this is uninformed, they were the source of the outbreak. And so it ended up back here, and with other stones which are behind a fence that we could only go so far in rescuing that cemetery from the wilderness. It had been overgrown for a long time. If you want to go online and look at, there's a movie online that is made by National Geographic about the cemetery on the National Geographic Discovery Channel. And I'll even share that with you all. I think I have a copy back here you can take with you. And, they talk about that, in that particular movie, we talk about how much we could rescue, because it costs a small fortune to take all the trees out without disturbing the tombstone. It was a big deal. And beyond the fence, there's another wooded area that goes all the way down to 160, where our property ends. And, there are tombstones in there. Tombstones of Native Americans. We're about 10 miles from the Trail of Tears. So, as we know, that we look at history and sometimes in a flat way. But as I like to say, history is not flat, it has dimension. And when we look at the Trail of Tears, we see these people marching. We imagine them marching in some sort of line from route point 1 to their destination point. In fact, they were, people left the trail. People left the trail. People who were left on the side of the road at the trail. And so some of those people settled in this area. As a matter of fact, it's a little known story. Right down in a little town called Sand Mountain, Missouri. Sand Mountain, Missouri was an African-American settlement near Greenfield, Missouri. And it's off Highway CC. And matter of fact, my family owns property. I inherited that property on CC. It goes right down to the Army Corps of Engineers Lake on Stockton. And there was a settlement there of Native Americans. And that one night, one of my older relatives who's passed away most recently, her name is Elizabeth Triplett, of blessed memory, recalls being a little girl and hearing those screams from those people being driven from their warm beds. So, when we look at history, we have to color it in sometimes, and often we don't have the hard data, which I'm sure you look for as a librarian. My daughter does. That you look for. We don't have the hard data, so we're left to having a sophisticated interpretation of oral history. Now, that doesn't mean we can just make things up, but we have to have oral history that's based on certain dates, or certain events, and some of the events that we knew took place were the uprooting of the Native Americans at Sand Mountain. And and we have further proof because people often find little bird arrowheads called bird points in that same area. So this is the area that I came from. I love the Ozarks. I love this area. I love this area. And when I was first married, I wondered if my wife would like this area. We used to teach school at PS 92 in Harlem. And I convinced my wife to move back to the country, and she was born and raised in Brooklyn, and now we're moving back to the country, and I thought, oh, what have I done to my wife? But now she's the one who's the gardener and the little armchair agrarian, and that holds no glamour for me. Because it only means work for me. Oh dear.
That's interesting. So what drew you out of the area? And
what drew me out of the area? Well, I don't know if this fits into our storyline, but if it doesn't, you can edit it. I was just a child of the 60s, as they say. And I remember my friend and I being here in 1967, and we heard about a music festival that was going on in Monterey, California. And we said, let's go. And we went down to the famous Route 66, and stuck our fingers out and went to San Francisco. And we lived in a place called Big Sur, California, in a place called Salmon Creek Commune. And we lived this. We had basically dropped out. I have no regrets about that. There's some things that I wish I had known, as U.B. Blake, the great jazz pianist, used to say, youth is wasted on the young, and it was thoroughly wasted on me. But you know, was a time where we were trying to find out about our place in the world, and I take this quite literally. I was, you know, I suppose you would say, dropped out, and I mean, really, as far as you know, the world had held nothing for me, and so that's why I left this area. That's why I left Missouri. That's why I left home. That's why I left my ancestral home. It was part of the reason why I left my you know, my ancestral you know, belief system. And so that's the answer to the question. It's a short version. You know, because we don't want to go into this, different story.
Do you remember any of the experiences hitchhiking?
Oh, sure. Sure. There's certain places, you can share with us. There's certain places that I go down Interstate 44 right now, and I have what they call recovered memories. Oh, this is a joke. They're really not. I shouldn't be making fun, because some people actually do suffer from that particular kind of you know, malady. But you know, sometimes you know, I'm almost caught in the time of standing there on Route 66 on near Rolla, Missouri, because for some reason or another we thought that if we went to St. Louis, if we, instead of from here west, then we'd have a better chance of getting a straight through ride. So I remember being by this side of the road in Rolla and thinking, you know, I still think of that area. I still think of that time. I still think of that time. I have lots of memories of Route 66 that don't have to do with my own personal, you know, so-called coming of age. So I'm still trying to do. But, okay, now pause on that. See if we're on track.
Yeah, no,
yes.
This is good. This is perfect. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I remember once that my friend and I, we figured, his name was Robert Glover. Robert was quite a guy. Robert lives in Jefferson City, Missouri. And he and I became immediate friends. We became close friends overnight. It was so quick. We became best of friends overnight. And I don't think I've had a friend quite like him in all my life. Robert was really quite a guy. We used to refer to ourselves as the cosmic coloreds. Youth. We used to refer to ourselves as the cosmic coloreds, and Robert and I had so much fun together. Robert was a musician. Robert went to, and actually at one point Robert decided that he was really going to, you know, pursue his musical career, and he went to Berklee School of Music in Boston. And right down the street from Berklee School of Music, my wife and I, when we were young and affected, had a restaurant on the corner of Mass Avenue and Commonwealth in Boston called Brother Juniper's Restaurant. And Robert was right down the street at Berklee. And so, you know, most of our time was spent together. And then Robert started teaching at UCLA Berkeley, taught music theory. And one night I got a call from an officer in Berkeley, California, police officer, and he said, you know, we just found your card in the pocket of a man who'd been murdered. It was Robert. He had been killed by those little gangbangers, you know, by those little people who didn't know what to do. They were lost children with no direction and no ideals. And they killed Robert, and they took his credit cards, and they went out and immediately started using them. They were caught, the first day. But anyway, that was Robert, and they asked me to come to Jeff City because his family was known in Jeff City. Both of his parents were professors at Lincoln University, and they asked me to come there to the Donovan's Chapel down on Lafayette Street, which is at the bottom of the Lincoln University, very near the statue of the four soldiers who were African American soldiers that founded that university. And I said, I can't do it because it would be too much for me. It would be too emotionally debilitating for me. I just didn't think I could do it. So her sister finally convinced me that I should, and I did go there. And I said, only if we do it, with a mixture of first century Christian service and something I know he would like. So we played Hayden, Charlie Hayden. Do you know Charlie Hayden? Mm-hmm. Charlie Hayden is a Missouri musician. He's actually from Missouri. Mm-hmm. He's on all these great jazz albums that you'll ever hear with Mingus and these guys. But he's white. He's a white guy, and his folks used to be like Grand Ole Opry type people. they had a program, Yeah. And anyway, so I said, well, we'll play some Charlie Hayden for Robert, and that's Robert is so bound up with me and the Route 66 experience, which is hitchhiking across this country. This is what we did.
In 1967.
1967, 1968.
Yeah. So tell us more about that experience. So you thought if you went to St. Louis, which was
that was false, but we're young, probably, who knows what else. But we just figured that there would be better rides if we went that way. And there are just places along the way that I remember, and there's songs, there's songs that sort of like trigger a certain emotion that have to do with being on the road and traveling down Route 66. There's one song by a group called the Youngbloods. Mm-hmm. And the Youngbloods had a song that says, and it's very, very profound lyrics. It says, come on people, smile on your brothers. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now. And we thought we could do that. We actually thought we could do that. I still think that, but I think it in a different way. I thought that you could do it just by your will alone. And of course we know it takes more than that, because there's other people involved in that view of the world, of loving your brother. And so sometimes I go down, there's a place on Glenstone, because I didn't live here. I didn't live in Springfield, because Springfield was sort of like it's a big town to me when I was young. And there's a place, and I can't think of, you know Karl's Tuxedo? Is it Karl's Tuxedo? On Glenstone? You know, there's a restaurant beside there. It's like a diner or something like this. Yeah. I don't know the name of it. But that was on Route 66. Yeah. And I remember going in there one time, and we must have been a sight, my friend and I, because we're flower children with complete outfits, and we weren't trying to scandalize anyone. It's just how we were. And I remember seeing these old guys in there, these old local guys in there, and they were talking about us, and of course talking about our hair, with Afro hair and all this stuff. Not only Afro, but unkempt Afro hair. If you say Afro, that would suggest a certain style. But, this was no style. So, anyway, I remember this person, these people talking about us, and I thought to myself, they're so uninformed, and that music was playing on the radio or somewhere. And every time I go by that little place on Route 66, that sort of, not every time, but often, it will, evoke a certain memory of the high ideals of loving one another. Right now, that was the so-called anthem for certain people. Let's do it now. And of course, we had leaders who exemplified that. Such as Martin Luther King, one you could actually trust. As of course we know that's not altogether true, because the Psalm says, "Put not your trust in princes, in sons of men, in whom there is no salvation. When his breath departs, he returns to his earth. On that very day his plans perish. The Lord will reign forever." But of course I didn't know about that then. I knew about it intellectually, but I didn't, it takes a little living to know that this is going to take effort. So that was, those are some of the memories I have on Route 66. And let me ask you this question. Does Route 66 go all the way to, where does it end in California?
That's a good question. It actually ends, most people think that it ends on Santa Monica Pier. So just west of LA, on Santa Monica Pier, is sort of the emotional end to Route 66.
Does it end on does it go by Highway 1?
It does, actually.
I thought so. Because I was in 1959, we hitchhiked from somewhere. We're in Bakersfield, California, on Route 66, the famous Route 66. Bakersfield, California was known for being a somewhat precious town. As a matter of fact, it really was. And we were sort of unenthusiastic hitchhikers that day. We were lounging on the road and hitchhiking. And a man said, some so-called local in a pickup truck, white person said, "Get up." And we thought he meant get up off the ground, He goes, "No, I mean entirely off the ground." Then we knew he was threatening us. So they went around to turn around, and some other people came down and they picked us up because they saw what was happening, and they drove us down the road for a long ways, and we drove to. It became dark, and it was a 1959 Ford Galaxy 500. I remember that because I used to like cars. And we stopped. The guy couldn't drive any further, so I got to get some rest. So we rolled down the windows, and the next morning I remember this mist was coming in my face, and I didn't understand what it was. But I was near the ocean. I was on the Highway 1. It was right on the Big Sur, on the coastal highway. And I remember smelling that feeling that mist on my face and telling that guy, "We gotta get out." So and we did, and we walked down the road, and we walked down to this place, and there are all these people who were young children on the road, as they say. And we just joined up with them and went up to Big Sur and lived there. So there it is. That's a little bit about Route 66.
Tell me, how did you get interested in becoming a priest and in the Orthodox Church in America?
Well, it sort of begins with that whole idea of trying to find my own roots as well. I'm third generation AME pastor's son. I was just where our old church is, that's where the church was. Yeah. On that side. On the other side was Methodist, Black Methodist. Great grandfather was the minister in Greenfield, Missouri. Poppy Bob Long. They called him Backer Bob because he chewed tobacco. And his wife was Native American and African American. She was born in the cabin under the tower in Fairgrove, Missouri. There's a water tower in Fairgrove, Missouri. And there was a cabin beside there. Still some pictures of it. And so I was looking for my roots, and I was looking for, the roots of Christianity. And I wanted to know where that Christianity was, that where the church fathers were part of it. And I couldn't find them. And I looked everywhere to try and find that, couldn't find it. And I knew that Christianity did not begin in America. I wasn't that smart, right? And so where did it begin? So I started, I was very interested for a long time in the Coptic church because they were, ancient Christians. And I was interested in the Ethiopian church where they were ancient Christians as well. And, but they were so ethnic that it was very difficult to be a part of it. As a matter of fact, I have 150 Ethiopian godchildren. In St. Louis, they call me the father of the Ethiopians because my wife and I sponsored those people to come to the United States after the civil war between the Eritreans and the Ethiopians. St. Louis was one of the 5 refugee centers in the United States for displaced people. And all these ethnic groups that came there from all over the world had support groups. Especially the Eastern European people had support groups. They've been living here for a long time. And here the Ethiopians did not. And there they were in the ghetto in St. Louis, not equipped for that. I mean, we're not even equipped for that. Americans aren't, with all the strife that exists. And here these people were. So we formed this organization called the Brotherhood of St. Moses the Black. St. Moses was a 3rd century Christian saint. And as St. Athanasius says, in defining what a saint is, he says, a saint is a sinner who never gives up. So that's how we use that term, not in the Roman sense of, having to, the people say who the saint is. The pontiff does not. So therefore, when we read something in the scriptures about the saints of God, we know that we're talking about righteous people. And who defines their righteousness? Those who, among us, who testify. So, anyway, so that's when I started finding, I wanted to know. God's Garden will tell you a little bit about that. But I'll tell you, since for the benefit of the listener, when I was on the back porch of the house many years ago, I was sitting there and I said, Mom, I was talking to my mother who was hanging out clothes, and I could still smell the fried potatoes and onions. And I don't know, I've got this, through the senses, everybody does that, At any rate, I asked my mom why there were so many races. And Mom said, well, son, there's so many races because we're all flowers in God's garden. Some of us are petunias, some of us are roses, and some are daffodils, and some are crabgrass. I'm sure she didn't say that, but different kinds of flowers. And of course that's enough for a child, but it wasn't nearly enough for a man. I wanted to know where those flowers were in God's garden that looked like me. I couldn't find them. My wife and I lived in Atlanta, Georgia. We're non-denominational pastors at the Christian community of Atlanta on Cherokee Street. It's a big street. I'm mentioning that street because some people may be familiar with Cherokee near Grant Park. And we had a friend who lived in Richmond, and we were young, we were in our 20s, and we decided to go see our friend John. And we jumped in the car, a little new Honda, a little 1982 Honda, and we drove down the highway as fast as we could to Richmond. And we got there, and our friend said, "You're just in time to go to church." And we go, "John." He goes, "Oh, you're going to love this church." And I was thinking to myself, "Oh, John." John was a white guy. I said, "Oh, John, he's going to take me to this church, and everybody's going to be glad to see me, you know, and they're going to be singing Kumbaya or something. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go to that church." But anyway, my wife is much more civilized. So, you know, we decided to go there. And we went to the church, and we came, it was in a house. It was a house church. And we came up the back stairs. And I remember thinking, I said it right out loud, and there were people going up the stairs. I said, "This isn't even really a church." Because I didn't have respect for other people. Or else I was frightened. I don't really know what my emotions were. But I said that. And to her embarrassment. And then we went inside, and there were 3 women who made up the choir. And I said, "This isn't even really a choir." You want to know choir? My family comes from choir. In the archives in Branson, Missouri, have the Sons of Sound, which is my mom's group, my mom's singing group, and they say that the Jordanaires and those groups modeled themselves after them, coming to their church. That's what the folklore is. Anyway, but they're in their archives in Branson. So I said, "This isn't even really singing." And they kept singing. And then I heard what they said. They said, "Rejoice, thou through whom God will flash forth. Rejoice, revival of fallen Eve. Rejoice, redemption of the tears of Eve. Rejoice, thou bride unwedded." So then then they said, I remember when I was young, I was dyslexic. And I was dyslexic for a long time. And I went to the Missouri State Penitentiary when I was 21 years old. I was in a 4.5-foot cell by 6.5 foot with 12-foot ceiling and no windows. And through the grace of God, I was cured from that. And some researchers say now that the technique that I used they use that term. I stumbled on it about the whole technique of mind and sound, the way that you speak and the way that your mind sees things. You have to kind of coordinate that. So it's work. And it used to be effortless for a long time. And the older I get, the more difficult it is. I see myself sort of slipping back into it. Anyway, the next verse that those ladies sang was, they were referring to Mary. And they said, "She makes most eloquent orators as dumb as fish." And I thought, oh my goodness, I didn't know you could even make those combination of words. And then they told me it was from the 2nd century. The song was from the 2nd century. And I started, warming up a bit. And until the priest came out. And he had incense. And I thought, oh no, I don't want this. And then the choir started singing, "Let my prayer arise as incense before thee, the lifting up of my hands as an evening sacrifice," from Psalms. And I went, okay, great. So that was the beginning of my introduction of, it evoked a certain sense of the eternal. That's what happened. Now, as far as missing certain aspects of my traditional Christianity that I've inherited through my forefathers, I miss that. You can't. The music is wonderful, but even in modern times, to me, it's almost unrecognizable in some instances. It sounds more like it's so homogenized that it doesn't have that distinct salvific flavor, as W.E.B. Du Bois says, about the only salvific music in the American genre is African American spirituals. You would not recognize some modern music. Because it does stimulate a certain part of you. And you can't deny that. But the word is salvific. And so, you know, when we start getting into that, it was easy for me to become, to convert. And people ask about my conversion. I didn't convert. Because I've been Christian since my grandmother brought me to the altar when I was a little boy. So I'm never not going to be a product of American, Afro-American Christianity. However it may change, as long as we hold to, you know, the roots of it. And that's the trick. To hold the roots without becoming, you know, stagnated or being a slave to that, a slave to conventionality, which really. And so that's a big chore. It's a big line to walk. It's a thin line to walk. Because, you know, because then we start getting into things like, and then we're way off field now. We're way far afield, aren't we? Just tell me to be quiet, fellas.
You're great.
I don't have my daughter here. Dorothy would be good. When I preach, Dorothy goes, we miss Dorothy. She's come home, Dorothy. Anyway, there's a great book I recommend. It's called Songs of Zion. It's Songs of Zion is probably written in the 40s. It's about African American music. The best part of it is the preface, because it talks about these certain stages of music, and you know the certain genre of African American church music. The first genre is called spirituals, and spirituals is defined as a music that waits on the Lord, such as Swing Down Sweet Chariot, and there's tons of them, songs that you know exemplify this genre. What they're basically saying is that I've got a home on the other side. You know, this is not of this world. Then of course, then the next one was the gospel genre. And the gospel genre had to do with, you know, hope in the Lord, that something could actually be done. Mm-hmm. And it was really nice. Then the third one was the one that was the dangerous one. And they just touched on it because it was written in an early time. And that was about finding, it had to do with integration and the dangers. Of course, we know it's a blessing. But the dangers of it, the dangers of integration is saying, we don't depend on the Lord. We depend on justice. You know, like, I want my satisfaction. And you know what? If you don't give it to me, buddy, you're going to court. And not only we're going to go into court, I'm going to probably win. So That's nice justice as far as the world is concerned. But as far as salvation is concerned, it may or may not be. So, I was looking, all those things are embodied in the dogma. Not necessarily in the way it works out. In the dogma of Orthodoxy. But problem with dogma and the way that people work things out, you're suddenly dealing with their fallenness. So you get people talking things like, equating politics with spirituality. Mm-hmm. And you can see how they run down the same line, but they're not the same. Yeah, so. At any rate, that's why, I hope I answered that question without being too. It would just take longer to answer it properly.
Sure. Yeah. We probably should maybe try to come back sometime, or we probably need to wrap up. But I want to follow with one last question. I don't know if you have a final question, but 1967 is almost 40 years ago now.
Long time ago. Don't tell me about it.
As you think back about those times, and hitchhiking on the road, you were young. Route 66 has almost become like this mythical thing now.
Is that right?
And you experienced it. And what are your thoughts about when you think back about that time? Was it just another time?
And it wasn't another time. No, I don't think it was another time. There's the Germans would say that the experience that we had, they would refer to it as the zeitgeist of the age. and it's exactly what it was. This was a time that was filled with, even if you were, I believe that God blessed that time. I believe that God blessed that time and gave people a certain charisma to do better than we had been doing. And we didn't take advantage of it altogether. But I think it was a blessed time. And I have nothing, no regrets about that time. Yeah. So that question that you had is good. Let's make sure we're answering it properly. There were a lot of things that were coming together in this country. War, disillusionment. You couldn't tell people this is for Uncle Sam and country. Not like you did with my dad and those guys. I'm a son of the American Revolution, card carrying. My great-grandfather fought in the Civil War. My great-uncle Harrison was a Buffalo soldier. They fought with Teddy Roosevelt at San Juan. My uncle Ellis was in World War I, wounded in France. My dad and my two uncles fought in World War II. My dad helped rewire Nagasaki after the bomb. He was with the Army Corps of Engineers. Came back to USA, couldn't get into the Electricians Union because they weren't taking black people. And they said that's the way it is. You can't tell that to people nowadays. And the people of my generation were totally disillusioned. You couldn't tell them that war was okay. And it was just for the country. We didn't believe that. We knew that wasn't for the country. Our brother was killed in Laos in 1965. when they said there were no troops, American troops in Laos. And he came home in a body bag. You can't tell that stuff to people from our generation anymore. So that was going on. There were young white people all over this country who were saying, as my dear friend James Cameron, who's the curator of the Afro-American Holocaust Museum in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, says, if it wasn't for the fair-minded white people of this country, we'd still be in slavery. He was being dramatic, but I get the point. And then there were all these young people saying, we're not going to have this anymore. We're not going to have this. It's not right to treat people like that. All this stuff was coming together. And the music and people trying to get along and love one another. all you need is love. Oh my goodness. I mean, it's true. Because it was God is love, right? Mm-hmm. God is love. So to say that you need more than love would be false. Mm-hmm. The trick is, how do you find out about God? Mm-hmm. So, that was not just another time. It was not just another time. It was a great opportunity. It was a great opportunity and I think that just the fact that you and I are talking to one another this morning is a direct result of that time. Mm-hmm. Talking to each other the way that we're talking to each other.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Yes.
That was good.
And I don't think this is what we wanted to do, was it?
For this?
So, yeah.
Well, that was perfect.
I think so.
Yeah, it's perfect. So I'm 50, turning 57 later this month. So I was 9 going on 10 the summer of 67. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't even to the stage where I wasn't even sure I was just a kid, But I remember that song, the Youngbloods.
Sure. Let's do it again, right? When you get a chance.
And I remember, I was 10 years, I'm not bragging, but that song touched me. When I was 10 years old, I was like, this is not just another song. I had older brothers, so.
Yeah. And the second verse is, till the one that's left us here comes to take us back again.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, my goodness. What Christian dogma do you want? I remember I used to be a Sufi, and we used to have Sufi dancing in the Golden Gate Park. And, it was universal. Universal. And it was, we're too young to dissect the parts of the faith. We're probably still too young. Mm-hmm. I know I am, especially the older I get. And we start weighing in on things, and you start having size that you take. And I'm a part of this group of an organization called Focus North America. And Focus North America was in Ferguson, Missouri, when they had the I don't know what you call it there. They had the problems, they had the troubles in Ferguson. And, and everybody wanted me to weigh in and take a side. Because that's what happens when you get old, too, right? And I said I refuse to do it. Because there's so much more to this. And, the only way we can get this straightened around is if we do the real hard thing. Forgive one another and really try and do something about it. Right. That's way too hard. Way too hard. Yeah. Tell me something else. You forgive somebody that trespasses against you. Forgive somebody who says all manner of evil against you falsely. Try that one. No, I don't think we're going to do that. Let's just disagree. Let's just agree to disagree on this one, okay? Well, anyway.
Well, thanks again.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah.
My pleasure.